Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. I am Emily Brooks. To provide background, I'll take you back to my high school days. I was always quite competitive and placed among the best pupils. Sports were another story. While I performed well in individual sports such as tennis, I did not always win. My competitive drive drove me to seek an advantage by cheating and playing mind games with my opponents. Although several were more athletically endowed, I often emerged triumphant. Under these circumstances, you might argue that this was my debut to manipulating my peers, a technique I had previously developed as a youngster with my parents and two brothers. Growing up in an upper-middle-class family educated me early on how to divide and conquer to obtain what I wanted from others. After high school, to escape the burden of earning a university degree, I enrolled in college to take concurrent courses. I lived on campus and shared a room with Olivia, who soon became my closest friend. Olivia was pursuing a marketing degree and was similarly clever. We easily drew male attention on campus due to our appearance and bodies. Weekends were seldom spent alone, since we preferred the companionship of varied male friends. By the end of our last year, we had both been in semi-permanent partnerships. During this period, I absorbed much of feminist ideas. Academically, I had outperformed all of my male contemporaries, and I believed in the adage that if you wanted anything done well, depend on a woman. This mindset permeated my personal life since I demanded complete control in any heterosexual connection. However, I realized the need of striking a balance and not being too forceful while courting a mate. I admit to having 5 sexual relationships throughout my high school and college years. I didn't perceive this as promiscuity. Rather, I was looking for prospective long-term partners since I had no bisexual tendencies. By the time I met John, my current boyfriend, I was ready to move on from prior relationships, particularly since we met at a university party. John was with a girl I knew from school, and it didn't seem they were getting along well. Somehow, John and I started chatting, and to our surprise, our dates appeared to get along and walked off to another room, leaving us alone. John and I then discovered that our respective partners were also considering ending their relationships with us. My ex was tired up with my manipulative tactics, as I had always controlled my relationships. John's partner was dissatisfied with his overall morals and honesty. She wanted more of a swinging and partying lifestyle. She was also into recreational drugs, which John disapproved of. John and I were very drawn to one another. There were sparks flying between us that first evening. John was really clever and entertaining to chat to. He asked for a date for the following week, and I quickly agreed. We later did the right thing and left the party with our dates. I told my date about Dear John in the vehicle as he drove me home. He was not offended by my statements, and we agreed to stay close friends. John and I were inseparable as a relationship. I have to confess that I chased until I caught him. He seems to enjoy all of the care I gave him. I'd always been a showy dresser, going above and above any time I saw him. Even after we married, I continued to wear this sort of apparel, comforted by my ability to draw the attention of other guys. Throughout our relationship, I kept my competitive feminist tendencies in check. I admired John's ability to be at peace with himself. He was quite mature and followed a stringent moral code, which matched his maturity. While not extraordinarily gorgeous, he was fairly appealing and well-dressed. His clothing were tailored to highlight his incredibly well-toned figure. He maintained fit by working out 3 to 4 times a week, and his weight never fluctuated by more than a couple of pounds throughout the period I was with him. I had never encountered a guy whose word was his bond, and I was certain that he would always tell me the truth. When we recognized we were on the path to marriage, we had sex together, and it wasn't just sex. He was an exceptional lover who teased, delighted, and fulfilled me more than any of my previous partners. If the German judge had assigned grades, he would have gotten a 7 on a scale of 0 to 6. I fell deeply in love with him. We went little over a year after we met at the party. At the time of our wedding, I was 24 and John was 29. I had begun working for a firm of 30 attorneys, but John was employed by a medium-sized software business that he had joined after earning his university degree in computer engineering. We were both compensated really generously. We purchased a home and fell into the conventional double income, no kids lifestyle, despite the fact that we had both agreed to have children at some point in the future. John was the most laid-back person I had ever met. In the early years, we were able to travel across Europe and even to the Orient. We were theater-goers and attended several other cultural events in our city. Because John was so simple to please, I naturally performed the research and booked the bookings for all of our adventures. I often went to athletic events with him since he was a huge fan, and by supporting his hobbies, I got a lot of joy out of just having these adventures with my spouse. John managed our shared funds. Our firms direct deposited our wages into each of our personal savings accounts. We would next transfer money from our separate accounts, minus our respective living allowances, to a combined account. During those initial years, when we each earned wage raises, we would deposit the extra funds into our joint account. John would use this account to make investments or pay for significant purchases on our behalf. I was promoted and given a 25% increase based on my success at work. I informed John that the increase was just 10%, leaving the other 15% to grow in my own account as crazy money. I'm not sure why I did this, but in retrospect, I realized that I was willing to use money to influence our marriage. As I previously said, John was really laid back and accommodating to the majority of my requirements. I believed I had complete control over our marriage, but John would fight tooth and nail if he felt I was making unreasonable demands. There were numerous examples in point. The first was the acquisition of our home. I wanted to live in a new subdivision, but John preferred to reside in a more established part of the city. He explained his decision to me, saying that the grounds were already planted and that the house required no extra work to become our home. He also believed that as a long-term investment, the older property would gain at a faster pace due to its location. There would be less sweat equity required, giving us more time to pursue our other hobbies together. His argument eventually persuaded me, although with some histrionics on my side, and we bought and moved into his preferred properties. I must admit that he was correct, and I have never regretted giving in to him in this respect. This was perhaps the only large purchase in which I allowed myself to be influenced. I wanted a green love seat to contrast with the rest of the living room decor. John protested, claiming that lime green had no place in a home. He despised the hue. Wouldn't the same love seat work in a different color? When I needed a new vehicle, I wanted a crossover. John, although not a tree hugger, was ecologically conscious and opposed purchasing such a massive gas hog that we, as a couple, did not need. I resisted him sexually over these and other little issues until I finally got my way. I may have won those many battles, but they marked the beginning of my defeat in the war. John seldom sat in the living room after we purchased the green love seat. When he had to be in there, he sat in a posture that prevented him from seeing the love seat directly. To my knowledge, he never sat in it. He would not drive or ride in my crossover when we went out as a couple. We would drive his hybrid Toyota, which is fuel efficient. Of course, the cost of driving the more maintenance-intensive and thirsty car came out of my own budget. After 8 months of driving the crossover, I was ready to give up because of the cost, but I wasn't willing to give him the pleasure of admitting he was correct. It was the same with other goods that I forced him to acquire despite his legitimate objections. His subtle disdain of the way I was manipulating him was palpable at every moment. One significant debate sprang from my desire for some pricey underwear. He claimed that he couldn't afford it with his own budget and would have to go into our joint account, which he was reluctant to do. I offered that he pay for it by increasing his expense account since he travels to a certain extent for his work. He got crazy and began yelling so loudly that I worried the neighbors would hear. That would be stealing. You want me to do something that is completely against my principles. I will not violate those beliefs to keep you happy. They'll tell you how you can afford it, divorce me, and with the settlement, you'll have adequate funds to do whatever you want. And I won't have to listen to your continuous goading and pushing to get more of the non-essentials that you seem to want in life. I was utterly taken aback when things gotten out of hand. Of course, I could have purchased the lingerie with my own crazy money, but I chose not to. After all, wouldn't I be purchasing such items for his vicarious enjoyment? I needed to diffuse the situation swiftly. I took off my blouse and bra, telling him that I didn't need lingerie and planned to burn my bra and not wear anything beneath my clothing. He attempted to grasp my bra, but I kept it out of his reach. He pursued me throughout the home, eventually catching me in the bedroom. We had both laughed so hard that all of our anger had vanished, and we proceeded to make amends. When I thought about this debate, it never occurred to me, nor did I contemplate, that he had boundaries that could not be crossed. I saw now that I had made a mistake by pushing John so hard in something that went against his ideals. During this conversation, I knew that pushing John to violate his ethical morals was a struggle I would never win. It would be better for my future demands if I backed down as soon and thoroughly as possible before reaching that stage. I was really astonished by John's rage given how rapidly the issue had escalated. He went from being cajoled to threatening to divorce me. His reaction to my idea seems entirely out of proportion. Possibly he did not mean to threaten to leave me, but there was no way to tell without pushing him to his limits. I was not prepared to put his determination to the test. His reaction did not seem reasonable, since he was usually extremely rational in his reactions to my requests. The only thing I gained from this argument was a greater understanding of the ground rules for future clashes. ID realized that I couldn't go against his personal integrity in order to win the fight. Such disagreements were few and paled in comparison to the pleasant moments we had, and I remained completely in love with him. We had been married for almost 4 years when John informed me that the firm where he worked was experiencing significant financial troubles. He was aware that he was in risk of losing his job due to staff cuts. He had called a headhunter and was given a position in his industry that, although paying more, required a lot of travel. It was a task for one person, but no one else possessed John's skill or experience in such a significant position. We spoke about it and agreed that, although it would be difficult for him to survive on my wages, he should take the post. We believed that we could tolerate the high level of separation for a few years while we built up our nest egg. In the meanwhile, he would keep his resume updated. Of course, all of this happened amid a huge slump in the IT sector, and no alternative work opportunities emerged. After a few months on the job, I saw that John felt lonely while he was away from me on the road. ID put stuff in his bag to cheer him up and let him know I was thinking about him and missing him. We chatted on the phone practically every night, but there was no replacement for face-to-face communication. While he was home most weekends and attended workplace conferences approximately once every 6 weeks, we attempted to keep our relationship on track. We both knew that we had consented as a couple to the long-distance relationship brought on by his employment, but I could sense that the time we spent apart was wearing him down. When he was in Chicago for an extended visit, I invited one of my friends and old classmates, along with her husband, to join him for dinner. He enjoyed their company for the evening and expressed his gratitude for my kindness when he got home in a most wonderful way, which delighted me much. For my part, I had a group of people I could turn to whenever I felt lonely. I spent a lot of time with my closest buddy, who was still unmarried. Olivia spent part of her time traveling for her work and told me about the loneliness she experienced on the road. She went on to say that sometimes it was too much for her, so she would let a guy pick her up and, if necessary, have intercourse with her simply to have the human touch she desired. I knew she wasn't promiscuous, but she handled her loneliness in that way. Despite the fact that we were the same age, she had yet to find someone she thought was suitable for a more permanent connection. Because she wasn't quite sober one evening, she told me she envied me because, despite John's many travels, he always returned home to me for sex and had always guaranteed me that he would be true to me. Olivia believed him, and so did I. She also said that now that ID told her how fantastic a lover John was, she'd love to put her shoes beneath his bed for at least one night. I saved the information for future reference. One weekend after intense sex, I confessed my secret sexual wish to John. ID want to engage in a sexual experience with another guy while John watches. It might even become a 3-way if he so desired. I could feel his whole body stiffen as he rejected the idea and said, when we married, we both pledged before witnesses and before God to forsake all others. We agreed to commit ourselves to each other for the rest of our lives. Are you asking my permission to fulfill your fantasy? If so, you can do that with your next husband. I knew then that I had already gone too far and needed to back down quickly before things escalated out of my control. I made light of it, telling him that several of the ladies at work had pondered the idea and others had already adopted this lifestyle. I told him I merely wanted to know what his response would be. He was irritated by my shift in tactics, but he seemed perplexed as to why I had even brought it up. When I questioned him about his own dream, he said it was to have 2 ladies, including myself, in the same bed one night. But he said that would never happen, and he would never put himself in a position to do anything like that since it violated his values. I never informed him that I could have fulfilled his dream if he had shown an interest. Because of his dominant position during our dreams, I informed him that if he ever cheated on me, I may leave him or, at the very least, exact my own retribution for his adultery. He told me that I would never be concerned about it. A handful of business employees gathered for drinks after work roughly once a week. If John had been home during the week, I would not have gone out with them, but I had some free time, and the group discussed some of the recent instances. I saw these sessions as opportunities to deepen my legal knowledge. My business had just recruited a new lawyer, James, an attractive single guy who caught women's attention anytime he went through the office. He flirted with me, made me feel desirable, and was constantly there at the bar with the others. In hindsight, my bright attire and receptivity to his flirting must have signaled to him that I was fair game. He catered to me and paid close attention to me while attempting to gain my favor, despite the fact that I declined every time he requested we meet privately. He made me feel unique, and being sought was quite thrilling. It reminded me of some of the joy I had when dating. I had never had a one-night stand since all of my sexual encounters had been with long-term relationship partners. It eventually reached me. I started to wonder whether I was missing something. It was a huge pleasure to learn I was wanted by another guy. I didn't want to cheat on John or face the difficulties of concealing an affair because I was afraid John would divorce me if he found out. I began to devise a strategy to get John to cheat first, and then I could get my retribution in return. I foolishly wanted to have sex with James. To that aim, via my business, I was aware of a quasi-legal company of call girls that had been established in one of the places that John often frequented. It was an organization that looked into whether partners would stay loyal while on the road. I phoned the business and chose a lady who, knowing John's taste for women from experience, had the highest chance of charming him. Because John contacted me before going out to dinner while he was abroad, I was able to convince Megan to join him on one of his few excursions to a bar in that city. I had sent her a photo of John via email so that there would be no errors. Megan's report said that John could not be seduced since she had physically flung herself at him. Because she had no idea it was my husband, just that his wife was a customer of our company, she had added that, although uncommon, it was heartening to meet a guy who was so loyal. I paid her invoice by wire transfer, so no record was accessible to my business, but a significant portion of my Mad account vanished. When John returned from that vacation, he mentioned to me that a lady had made a move on him, but he had declined. I realized I needed to try something different if my strategy was going to work. I'm not sure why, but I was getting preoccupied with the thought that John was unintentionally winning this war and that, in my confused reasoning, I would be unable to have sex with James. I'm ashamed to report that I never considered the morality of my ideas, much alone the potential consequences for John or our marriage. I still loved my husband, who was devoted, loyal, and genuine, but I was on a mission to get him to commit adultery so that I could cuck him. Any sane woman would have been happy to be married to such a guy, but the exhilaration and anticipation of winning another fight overruled my better judgment. True, I hadn't won all of my fights with John, but I felt I was still ahead in the game. The struggle between his sensible attitude to our life together and my aggressive approach. After all, I knew I was the dominant person in our relationship, and I wasn't going to let him undermine me. I asked Olivia for aid with my next idea. She was aware of my desire to encounter another guy and informed me, very calmly, that the grass was not always greener on the other side of the fence. She reminded me that one-night encounters were not all fun and games, and that I should be grateful for my marriage. I told her that I wanted her to seduce John, and that we would never get caught up in my scheme. She was hesitant at first, worried she would lose our friendship. I eventually overcame her resistance since she genuinely loved John and wanted to experience his lovemaking. I had a copy of John's schedule and knew when he would be in Springfield, a location that Olivia often visited. He'd complete his meetings late Friday afternoon, and there were no flights home until Saturday morning, so he'd have to stay overnight. Olivia would make plans to stay at the same hotel that night and meet him by mistake. I knew John was very cautious while traveling. He had investigated all of the area assault drugs because he was scared a stranger would sedate him and then abandon him in an alley after stealing them. I had also done some research and got some GHB, which I gave Olivia to help him overcome his inhibitions and enable her to take him sexually. I didn't expect him to be on guard around Olivia since he knew her well as a friend and loved her company. The stage was now set. When John returned on Saturday, he did not seem good. I opened his baggage as usual and discovered Olivia's panties, which served as our indication that she had succeeded. I now have a hunting license. I challenged him, and he confusedly acknowledged to having been with Olivia the night before. I acted irritated and sent him to the guest room, giving him the cold shoulder for the remainder of the weekend. I met Olivia for lunch on Monday and listened to her report. Everything had gone according to plan. He had been so drowsy from the medications that he imagined I was in bed with him. She was captivated by his lovemaking methods, despite the fact that he was not particularly vigorous owing to the narcotic's muscular relaxant effects. She begged me to rethink what I intended to do since, the morning before leaving for the airport, he was extremely anxious about what had occurred to cause him to violate his morals and the impact of his seduction on his fundamental convictions. This was more of a worry for him than any potential punishment I could have planned for him. She really regretted what she had done to him, and in the light of day, without the impact of narcotics, she was unable to persuade him to perform with her again. She assured me that my spouse was highly moral and loyal. We had caused him enormous emotional suffering by forcing him to cheat. She advised me to think what would happen to my marriage if John found out what had been done to him. In hindsight, I see that I made a significant error by not listening to her remarks. But at the time, I foolishly believed that I had committed too much time and money to abandon my goal. I had never considered the possibility that John already knew me too well from my antics and attempts to get my way over our years together. While he was perplexed by the present scenario, he must have smelt a rat when he considered my previous conduct in light of what had lately occurred to him. When I went to speak to him on Tuesday, I contributed to his suspicions, though I didn't realize it at the time. I informed him that I was going to take another guy as payback, and I wanted him to be there to see it. He rebuked me, claiming that two wrongs do not constitute a right. The fact that I was cold-bloodedly plotting an affair with someone else exacerbated the problem, since he believed he had merely mistakenly strayed. My actions may lead to the dissolution of our marriage, which, although I desired time with James, I certainly did not want to lose John. His attitude and loud voice effectively signaled that I had struck his ouch factor once again, and there was no way I was going to commit adultery in front of him and compel him to watch. I understood it would be a mistake to push the envelope since he was already aware of my desire and recognized that I had intended to satisfy it via my so-called retaliation. Though I had been behaving violently throughout, I must have shown some disappointment, which raised his suspicions about the whole situation. I backed down at this point because I believed that half a loaf was better than none, and I agreed to let him off the hook about the watching brief. A week after Olivia seduced John, I invited James into mine and John's bed. I had ordered John not to come home that day or evening until I had exacted my retribution, since he was so emphatic about not watching. I was overjoyed that I had managed to go one over on John and won another fight that I assumed would never be uncovered. My assumption that John would be unable to put two and two together was a fundamental mistake on my behalf. I had left him with too many hints. I wasn't fully aware, and I never considered how heartbroken he was by his own adultery. I had deeply injured him with my idea, and he must have resolved to act to confirm his suspicions. I had no affections for James. All I wanted was to fully enjoy the excitement of outside sex on my own terms, in my own home and bed. I immediately concluded James was an inadequate lover. Nonetheless, I reasoned that my hunting license may still be valid if I could keep John distraught and off guard while keeping him in the dark about everything. I mocked John, claiming that he had caused the issue and that I was only getting back at him. I had forbidden him from having any intercourse with me during that week, but I had informed him that he could get fortunate as soon as I got my retribution for his indiscretion. The Saturday after I had bedded James, I contacted Olivia and agreed to go shopping with her. It was an unrestrained talk, and I expressed my gratitude for her efforts on my behalf. I was so happy after my triumph that I asked her if she believed she could get John again. Because I had had a good time, and there was no one else on my horizon, I decided I may want to look into future prospects. James' lovemaking had been inadequate, but I was nevertheless ecstatic that I had been able to completely mislead John with Olivia's and my connivance. John still believed he had strayed first. When I got home after shopping, John wanted to chat with me. I was fairly hostile, pointing out to him that he had been the first to cheat, but I had just gotten even with him the night before. He made the logical point that he had been quite upfront about his alleged indiscretion with Olivia, and he wanted to know what had transpired between me and my paramour. I had been looking forward to my evening of lovemaking with him because I was dissatisfied with James' dismal performance. I was relieved that, as I suspected, John had no clue what I had done. I was still proud of myself for cheating on him the night before without his knowledge of the scenario. John's first query was if James and I had used protection the previous evening. I attempted to avoid the subject since I had never required James do so. When I eventually revealed that we hadn't, John informed me that neither of us would be fortunate for the following 8 months since one of us may get infected with HIV as a result of mine or his unintentional disobedience. His reply was terrible since I had a sexual yearning for him that evening. While I was ready to gamble that Olivia was not sick, there was no way I could guarantee James was clear. I was still certain that John knew nothing until he inquired how I located someone so swiftly to exact my retribution. How long had I had someone waiting in the on-deck circle to exact my revenge? Why had I attempted to persuade my spouse to help me achieve my biggest sexual dream as a form of vengeance? I had to retrace and wait. I recognized I was in serious danger and had made another significant error by allowing James into my bed without a proper time gap. It would have been considerably preferable to have taken him when John was out of town for business. I still wanted to rub John's nose in it and planned to do so for a long time. Now I realize I'd made another significant error. I still believed that the deception I had committed would never be detected. He kept going. How did you get Olivia to participate in this whole fiasco? Think about this. Your actions have been confirmed through other sources which have helped resolve many of my suspicions. I know what additional information I need to verify the details of this entire escapade. If you lie, it is definitely the end of us and our marriage. I want the truth. You know we'll be interrogating Olivia about her participation. You seem to be quite close with the lady I allegedly slept before she became disloyal to you. Most spouses would claw out the other woman's eyes, yet you phoned her and went shopping with her today as if nothing had occurred between us. My husband had never spoken to me in such a cold and unemotional voice, and I realized that I had never seen this side of his personality before. He was not going to be put off by any of my platitudes or arguments, and he wanted answers to his questions. He continued to speak to me in that cold voice, without histrionics, and I realized that I was in serious trouble. Although I knew Olivia would protect me if she was alone when talking to him, I had no idea how she would react to an emotional scene like the one that I was now confronted with. Somehow, John inveigled Olivia into coming to our house while we were in our confrontational mode so that he could get the answers to all his questions. She arrived at the house, and I could do nothing but recognize that I was truly busted, and there was no way I was going when Olivia arrived. I tried to convey a message to her that John was not conversant with everything, but he was still being relentless with his questions. I tried to intervene in his questioning of Olivia, but he would not allow my interference. He quickly determined from her that I had been contemplating cheating on him for over 5 months and had put various plans together. He was angry, but still controlled, and held his emotions in check as my plan was gradually "Did you sedate me?" he inquired. I understand that I had no sensible ideas that night. I kept thinking that if Emily had been in that bed with me, I wouldn't have been able to perform. From what I remember, you were much more passionate in bed than Emily normally is. What did Emily mean when she asked you over the phone this morning whether you could reach John again? Olivia revealed that she had given him a half dosage of GHB that I had gotten for her alleged seduction, and he was now fully aware of my whole plot. He had earlier hinted that he had tapped the phones with some of his queries, and he now had us dead to rights. His voice raised to a shout. You had me take a narcotic created from floor stripper and drain cleaner? You are both fortunate that you are not in prison or on trial for involuntary manslaughter. That narcotic should not be taken in conjunction with any other medications or if the user has consumed alcohol. That night, I took Percocet and antibiotics for a toothache, and I had a drink with supper. I felt sick to my stomach. I had no idea that my actions may endanger his life. It was simply another victory that would give me the freedom to pursue another guy on my own terms. John continued, but his voice had reverted to the frigid hard tones that he had used earlier. Do you comprehend what you did? You attacked me and then attempted to blame it all on me. You have treated me in a terribly humiliating manner throughout the last week, blaming me for something that was entirely beyond of my control. You even had the nerve to keep blaming me when we started this chat. Am now satisfied that I've uncovered the whole of your plan to betray me. Am not sure which portion of what you did to me was the worst. I may have gotten over your plan to screw James and been ready to accept it, but why did it have to happen in my bed? Was it your intention to put more salt into my wounds? You've made numerous errors in the past to get your way, but this time you made some serious ones. It wasn't enough for you to try to humiliate and cuck me. You also tried to compromise my principles, which you always said were important to you and the reason you married me. Do you know what you've done? You sedated me and forced me to become an involuntary adulterer, violating my marital vows. That stings more than the fact that you planned my attack and adultery without considering what I would think or how it would affect me. I know you feel you will never be caught in your lies, but I would have had to be a total idiot not to notice all of the proof you left for me to locate. You have some bad ideas, and then you keep pushing until you reach the brink. You went too far this time. Cheating on me in the way you did was really unpleasant and mean-spirited, and I don't believe I'll ever get over that. You deceived me by organizing my whole seduction and then purposefully cheating on James without consideration for my mental anguish over what you caused to happen to me. Furthermore, you continued to betray me by tricking me and accusing me of being the unfaithful partner despite the fact that this was all part of your strategy from the start. You attempted to persuade me that it was all my responsibility, despite the fact that you had initiated my whole betrayal. You even chose, through your desire and foolishness in this matter, to pass me on to another lady, whom I would never have wanted because of my principles, just so you could have fun with another guy. Then you asked her to fetch me again. What type of a deceitful, controlling, and stupid woman are you? Do you really despise me and my principles to the point that you have to behave like a expletive in order to dominate me? You went so far as to desecrate our marriage bed with your acts. Everything you did was an attempt on your behalf to thoroughly humiliate me and surrender our life together in order to cuck me, the guy who has always cared profoundly and tenderly about your well-being. John stopped, his rage visible in every syllable. Emily, I have to think you don't want to marry, particularly to a guy like me. I couldn't believe how disrespectful you have been to your wedding vows by arranging such a circumstance so that you may have a shady romp in the hay with another guy. Anyone who is unable to respect their spouse's rights and views demonstrates a total lack of regard in respecting that individual. Your deeds toward me spoke louder than words. You don't respect me or my views, and I can't trust you anymore. Since that trust is no longer there, I don't see how we can continue or repair our marriage. I am leaving you. I'm going to pack immediately, and my lawyer will contact you. I followed him into the bedroom and tried to talk to him as he packed. I kept apologizing, but he wouldn't listen to anything I said. I thought I was being very sincere, but my words fell on deaf ears. After he finished packing, he turned to me and said, "For what you have done to humiliate and rob me of my dignity, I will exact my own revenge. I haven't decided yet, but I may identify James as a correspondent in my divorce proceedings." Olivia was still there after John left, and I sat sobbing in her arms at my current and potential future losses. At the time, all I could think about was that I had been caught in my lies and was only sorry that I had been discovered in my deception. Olivia comforted me, and though her comments were never in a "I told you so" vein, she tried to offer some suggestions as to how I might win back my husband. When I told James that John had left me because of our actions last weekend, and that he might be named as a correspondent in the divorce action against me, he blanched. Sexual contact between employees was frowned upon in our firm due to harassment laws, and such a divorce action could most likely cost both of us our jobs. James came to me on Wednesday and told me that John had called him, inferring that there was a possibility that I had transmitted a sexual disease to him. James was furious and vilified me. I had been tested on Monday and received a clean bill of health, but I decided to let him worry about the possibility of being infected. He deserved it. When I returned home from work that same week, I discovered that the majority of John's belongings, as well as all of the items in his office, had been removed from the house. At the time, I was aware that John was working in the city, and I had heard that James had been roughed up in the parking lot. My lawyer informed me, pursuant to my action to contest the divorce, that John had provided videotapes of my tryst with James, and he had been given a copy so that he could properly advise me. I now knew where John's comment about additional evidence had come from. He had probably never reviewed the entire tape since such action would have been painful for him, based on his previous comments in this regard. My lawyer advised me that, while the original no-fault offer was John had prepared financial statements outlining the current values of all our household belongings, the cars, the house, the nest egg account, and even his allowance account. I began to understand that he was so distressed by all of my actions that led to his betrayal that he was willing to use this strategy to get rid of me. I finally agreed to settle on a no-fault basis after fully considering the total situation. After the divorce was finalized, I was very unhappy and depressed because I had lost John because of my own actions. I tried to contact John throughout the divorce process to try to persuade him to change his mind, but he refused to take or return any of my phone calls, and he did not even respond to letters I sent to him in care of his office, all of which were returned unopened. After several months, he finally answered one of my phone calls. I didn't want to accept this, but later realized that he knew me better than I knew myself. At that point in my life, if he had taken me back, I would probably have kept testing him and trying to compromise his values in another manner. I was distraught. This was the first time that I had ever been so badly caught out in my manipulations, and I still did not want to blame myself for what I had done. Because of my depression and John's intransigence in trying to work things out, I went to a therapist for several sessions. He identified my problems in very short order, based on reading a similar outline of my life that you are now reading here. His conclusions were, I was a feminist who denigrated males. I tried to override my man by not recognizing that he was a strong, equal partner throughout our marriage. Due to jealousy, I could not abide my partner's strong values and attempted to undermine them. I was basically an insecure person in that I tried to attract the attention of other men through my manner of dressing. I treated my marriage as a war where I fought non-essential battles when there should have been more give on my part. The so-called battles that I had won in my undeclared war were of non-critical importance to my husband. He only fought when there was something affecting his living space and his principles. Although I was interested in a stable marital relationship, I did not have the emotional maturity to be faithful to my husband. Finally, I resented that my husband had such strong values that I would have liked to share, but was willing to use devious measures to circumvent because I envied his strength of purpose. My therapist didn't tell me what to do to fix a situation. Instead, he identified the problem and let the client figure out how to fix it on their own. Fortunately, I was intelligent enough to listen to his advice. I reflected on what I had learned about myself. Why had I been jealous of John? What was the point of my mind games with him to win? I was not only willing to jeopardize our entire relationship, but I also realized that John had gotten his ultimate vengeance without my knowledge. He had left and divorced me against my will, and I had completely lost my perceived undeclared war. Please, John, let me talk to you for a minute. I've done a lot of thinking about my overall behavior, especially after you told me you forgave me, and I can never come up with any reasons to adequately explain how badly I behaved toward you. I knew that your values were important to you and indirectly to me because they had added a lot to my love for you and our marriage, so I couldn't ask you to take me back, and I wouldn't do it if the roles were reversed. I couldn't try to undermine those values of someone I loved. When you discovered my total disregard for you and your beliefs, I realized how empty and worthless my apologies were. At the time, I was more concerned with how I had been caught in my lies than with the fact that I had acted so abominably toward you. I hope this apology is of some value to you now that I am fully aware of how extreme my actions were. I still love you and will always care about you. I had finally realized that I could no longer be with John because he didn't want me because of how I had misguidedly hurt him so badly, and I was determined to make plans and changes to move on with the rest of my life. My apology provided me with some closure to the whole affair and my divorce, and I had begun to come to terms with myself. Despite the fact that the house held a lot of memories, the majority of them were positive memories of our time together. I began to dress more conservatively and in a more classy manner, and I traded the crossover for a CR-V, which, while still having all-wheel drive for winter conditions, was better suited to my new lifestyle. I blocked out the last week of my mistreatment of John, and I never regretted I keep in touch with Olivia, though I don't see her as often as I used to, more a fault on my part than hers. She is very friendly with John, who doesn't blame her for her part in the whole final fiasco. She does not gossip, but I learned that John had transitioned from the computer business to the security and surveillance field, where he has founded a company using the money from his portion of our nest egg. I was able to send him some I saw my assistant as a partial atonement for my indiscretions toward him. I understand that John is seeing a widow who lost her husband in a traffic accident, and he also sees a lot of Olivia because they have become such good friends. I was thinking one day that since I had lost John through my own actions, it would be poetic justice if he married Olivia. They are really the same type of people, and I hope that they both finally realize 8 months after our divorce was finalized, I was promoted to the position of Records and Information Technology Manager for the firm, which came with a significant salary increase. At the traditional lunch with a senior partner following such an announcement, he said, "Emily, 8 months ago you did not previously dress appropriately, and you will now be meeting several of our big customers. You wear your feminism on your sleeve, and you seem to have lost much of your uncontrolled hatred and aggressiveness toward the individuals you interact with. You've made significant adjustments in how you behave with people. We studied the legal papers, are aware of your divorce, and believe that this was one of the primary elements contributing to the positive changes in your professional persona. We've always regarded you one of our best workers. If your personal weaknesses could be addressed, we were eager to promote you. A divorce is undoubtedly upsetting, even if you could make adjustments in this respect. I've gone through one myself, which was mostly induced by working such long hours to get ahead. In your situation, the company is not interested in the specifics of your divorce from your ex-husband since we understand that it is your personal business. My partners and I believe you have risen above your personal troubles in recent months, and I am ordered to inform you that if the positive improvements we have seen in you continue, you will most likely be an associate of the company within 2 years. I was taken aback, because I hadn't expected to see such a drastic change in my attitude and lifestyle as a result of my therapy and self-improvement vows. I had adapted, and I was now much more of a complete and competent person, able to live with myself while maintaining total self-respect based on my newfound values. I believe John would have been proud of my adoption of many of John's primary principles. My current issue is that I am 30 years old and want a child, which had been in the future plans for John and myself. I am definitely not willing to be a single mother. I am dating occasionally, but the men that I meet are either mama's boys, rejects from other divorces, predators, or smooth talkers like James. While I am currently celibate and don't date often, I am still trying to extract another gold nugget from the dross. Thank you for watching. Do you believe redemption is possible in this story? Please leave your comments below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.